Now, to get back to politics, but a slightly different story, although I will reflect your messages which are coming in this morning about Prime Minister Boris Johnson, whether he should resign, whether it's honourable to do so, with a comment from one of his backbenchers saying it would be. Look at the examples of women. Look at what Theresa May did. Look at what Margaret Thatcher did. I will come to your views on that and whether he should or could or would resign very shortly. But a group of Labour Party MPs and members of the House of Lords are challenging the party's decision to turn down an application by a group called the Labour Women's Declaration to have a stall at this year's Labour Party conference in Liverpool, which happens in September. This group, known as LWD on their website, describe themselves as a movement to raise the profile of women's sex-based rights within the Labour Party and the wider socialist movement. The Labour Party has told both organisations that the decision to turn down its applications, was purely a commercial one, and the applications for stalls were just oversubscribed and that they're welcome to apply again next year. For anyone who hasn't been to a party conference, numerous charities, organisations, companies and pressure groups set up a stall in the exhibition area of the conference venue, which allows them to highlight their message to anyone attending. And one of those challenging the decision over LWD, just to remind you what that refers to, Labour Women's Declaration, their application is the Labour peer, Baroness Dianne Hayter, who sponsored the group's application. She's the former chair of the Labour Party's ruling body, the NEC, and a former shadow leader of the House of Lords. And just before I come to you, Dianne, I wanted to say we did invite members of the Labour Party on this morning. Instead of anyone coming on, we have this statement which says we receive hundreds of applications for conference stands every year, meaning it is always oversubscribed. Not everyone can be successful. Labour passed the law that protects women on the basis of their sex and trans people from discrimination. We stand by it. Let's get to what you think's going on, Dianne Hayter. Baroness Dianne Hayter, good morning.
Good morning.
The application process then, was it all as standard as you understand it? Was there anything untoward about that?
Yes, I mean, there are still spaces available. They've been telling us that there's no small spaces available, but we know there are big spaces available. And I'm offering that we will take one of the larger stands. They'll get even more money from us. And my offer to the Labour Party is if there are no small stands available, which we would have preferred, we'll have a big stand and we know those are available. I'm afraid this is not the answer. I mean, there is to turn down a group of Labour supporting women from the conference when Labour has done so much for women's rights. You know, I've been campaigning as a feminist for 50 years, and nearly all the major advances we've had have been from the Labour Party.
So what
government?
Well,
but this continues, and we must continue to be there.
What do you think's going on then? Because the Labour Party's line, as I've just read it, is this is a commercial decision. It sounds like you do not believe that is the case. So what do you think is the real reason?
I'm afraid that there are some people who do not want us to continue the sort of campaigning we've done for years, which is that there are certain areas that should be, confined for women only. And this is particularly, and it's all in the Equality Act that was passed by the Labour government. For example, hospital wards, same-sex wards, sleeping arrangements, changing rooms, women's refuges, hostels, prisons. Women should be able, as we've just heard from your last speaker, women's solidarity is very important, but also women sharing problems. You had two women on yesterday who'd bonded over the fact that they were both widows of young children. And that spark, that understanding of women is one that women should be able to share.
So you just hang on. If we could try and keep it focused for a moment. I understand what you're saying about the bigger picture of how you view women working together. But to be clear, you do not believe the reason that the Labour Party has supplied to us as a programme and to you and to this group?
I'm afraid not. We applied very early. We are, a Labour Women's Declaration. There are still big stalls available, and we're very happy to take one of those. I used to be chair of the party, and we never would have turned down a group like us. I'm afraid there are some people who I think do not want a group campaigning for women-only spaces to be able even to meet delegates and do that in a very safe environment at the Labour Party.
Because, I mean, we did invite the NEC General Secretary, David Evans, to join us on the programme, but our bid wasn't successful. We also issued an invitation to the Labour Party chair and the Shadow Equalities Minister, Annalise Dodds. Again, she's not available today. She's out of the country, we're told, on other business. I suppose, it's hard to get these answers to these questions that you're proposing without representation from them. But within the statement, it's clear that there is an understanding what you will be saying, you think is the real reason for this, because we have this line saying Labour passed the law that protects women on the basis of their sex and trans people from discrimination. We stand by it. What do you make of that as included in the response?
Well, it's interesting that they dropped in trans, isn't it? Because this has got nothing. I mean, why have they suddenly dropped in trans? I support trans rights. I mean, I have campaigned for that for years. I've been involved all my life for family reasons with trans issues. So why, in the Labour Party response, did they suddenly drop the word trans in when we're a Labour group, a Labour women's group? I mean, I think the hint is there. I think the fact they won't come on and debate this. And I should say to you, we have asked to talk to them in private. I have made approaches at the very senior level of the Labour Party that we will go and meet in confidence and talk through what are their problems. I mean, as I say, the fact they've dropped in trans suggests to me that there are pressures on them that somehow us campaigning just for women's rights, for human rights for women. I mean, we're not very revolutionary, really, somehow is at odds with trans rights. I do not accept that.
Are there any areas of what was planned for the stand or communication around it, I've got no idea, that would be at odds with or perceived to be at odds with trans rights?
Absolutely not. I mean, I know there are some trans activists who feel that people who identify as women but are, were born men should, if they have been subject to domestic abuse, as they can be, should have access to women's refuges. Now, women who are escaping, we've just heard, from your previous speaker, people who are escaping from male violence want to be in a completely safe female environment. And so there are undoubtedly, not many, but some trans activists who feel that keeping anything just for people born with a female body, with, ovaries and wombs and all the stuff that we've got, is somehow against their rights.
You don't accept that, but I suppose what that's why trans has been included in the Labour Party statement, isn't it? Because that's the perception and that's the concern. So,
and very interestingly, they only told you that. They have never told us that. Now, I find that really interesting. It took till we were on Women's Hour for them to give that. They said it was a commercial decision, and they've suddenly said something to you that they've never said to us.
So what's the next move? What do you think you're going to be able to do? Are you able to get a meeting with Keir Starmer?
If it is a commercial decision, my offer to them, and I assume someone's listening, is we'll take the big stand, we'll pay more money, and if that is the reason, then they need to be able to give us
a... Oh, you've just frozen. You've just frozen on me there, your connection, sadly to say, because I did have one more question, if could, but you have just disappeared. Sorry, but we were getting an idea of what was the next move, and you have one more question. Perhaps we'll get an update from Baroness Dianne Hayter, who is a Labour peer and was supporting the application of that particular group, the Labour's Women's Declaration, which of course we wanted to hear about here on Women's Hour, to have a stand at the party conference, the annual party conference. But as I mentioned, we did ask for representation from the Labour Party, but were unable to get it, but got that statement in lieu of it.